Inking Comics with Jimmy. Today I'm going to be talking about spotting black on your page. How do I do it? Well, let's find out.
Well, I want to start this video out by saying I'd like to apologize in advance if I sound a little nasally or or like dry throat. Unfortunately, it is flu season here and a little bit under the weather. But I wanted to go ahead and make a video for this week regardless. And the video focus is going to be on spotting black. And that is basically filling in the black on the page. As you can see here on the page on your screen, all the area that is filled in blue, and I've placed lines around them, and the lines that kind of fence in the large negative area is called holding lines. And that's so that way you know where to fill in your black or how to spot your black up to the fenced in area, which is the holding line that will then hold in the ink within that boundary. What I like to do is I use a brush when I am spotting my black for larger areas. I use the same size brush that I would do my line work with. This brush is a Raphael 8404. It's a size 2. This one here, the end of the brush is a little worn, slightly a bit more than the one that I actually use to do my line work. So if you save your older brush, you can repurpose them. And I use this one to spot my black because it still has a nice snap and it gets to a decent point, but not as fine as what I would like for my fine line work and feathering and things. So I have a newer brush for that, the exact same brush. So if you save your older brushes, you can use them to spot black. You can use them when the sable hair on the end get really frayed or you know, they don't snap back together. You can do dry brush effects and use them for different things. For spotting black, I dip my brush in to my bottle of ink, and I use the same Cornor ink that I use for my nibs and for my brush. I use the same ink to spot my black because I like the solid black look, and I like to use the same exact ink throughout my entire page just to kind of keep my original looking as nice and appealing as I can keep it, because in case I later on want to sell the original, because there is a niche market for that. There are collectors out there, especially with a new project like this, and a new penciler. This guy is a newcomer and he's very talented. You know, he's still growing, he's still learning, but this is some of his breakout work here that will be printed in this project called Crimson Outfit. And the penciler's name here is, well, his name is Andre and his last name is Lunatic. And so I've had some fun with his last name. Some of the video titles, when I titled the video Inking Lunatic, was actually referring to inking over the penciler whose last name is Lunatic. He's located in Russia. He's very, very talented. He's still growing. He's still evolving. And it's really, you know, I'm excited about this project because I'm one of the first inkers on him. You know, he hasn't really established a look yet, and so I get to kind of play around with different types of textures and looks and adjust his rendering just a little bit, and he and I are kind of playing around with that, and thankfully we've both like the line work, the final line work, results that we've had so far on these pages, and the more and more I ink him, the more comfortable we get, and more of we find a rhythm. But when it comes to spotting the black on the page is equally as important as the line work and all the textures and the rendering that I was just mentioning on Andre's work, because the black can help bring out and push things in the page forward. It can push things back. It separates the your negative space, because you've got the black negative space and you've got the white negative space, and it's a good way to balance out a page. So spotting black and a well spotted black on a page can really add weight and depth to a page. It can really help the viewer's eye on that page. It can help identify things, and it can help the eye focus on certain areas of the page. And it also, with a good balance of the black like this, when the pages are colored, it helps add really nice contrast, to the color work. So once it's completed, it becomes a really beautiful page. But when you're working on it like this, you're kind of having to think ahead. It's not colored yet, so you're working in black and white as an inker. We work in solid black and white, where a penciler gets to work in gray tones. We don't have that ability. So, and then we're also, like I mentioned, we're thinking ahead as to what it's going to look like in color. So I mentioned before that I use the same size brush, the number 2 round, to spot most of my black on the page. For generally medium to large areas, anything that's even larger, like large borders around panels, or the floor in this large panel, it's an interior view of a limousine or an extended vehicle, and there's a large black floor underneath the feet of the character. And with that, you can actually take a larger brush and use the same ink and spot that black much faster. But since I already had the size 2 already was out and it was being used, I just went ahead and I didn't want to break that rhythm. But you can, if you want to get like a flat tip brush or a wider brush, if you feel more comfortable switching it out. When I'm spotting my black on the smaller little areas, I generally would just, when I'm doing the line work, if I'm doing the line work with a nib, then I'll fill in that area with my nib by making sure that there is plenty of ink in the inkwell of the nib, and lighten up on the pressure so that I don't scratch the fibers or dig into the fiber of the paper. In this case, it's a 400 series Bristol board that has a tooth to it, and the surface on this particular Bristol board is vellum. And when we say tooth, it has a bit of a texture. So if you drag the nib with a little heavy pressure, you will dig up the fibers on the page. But I like it because, not that when I dig up the fibers, but I like the vellum surface because I can feel that tooth. And as I'm dragging my nib, it catches the ink from the nib, and it just flows out so well. I've become very comfortable with it. I can ink over smooth. I can ink over vellum. Strathmore makes a 500 series, which has a plate surface, which is extremely smooth. And there's the reason I mention the different types of surfaces is so that you can try them and see what you're most comfortable inking over. Although you don't always get to pick the surface of the paper, it really depends on what your penciler likes to draw on or what they're handed. Sometimes when you work regularly with a penciler, you can ask them, hey, would you mind penciling on this particular surface, because I'm much more comfortable inking, and I want to make sure the final result is to your satisfaction. It's the best line work that I can produce. So if you talk to your penciler, you can do that. But a lot of times as a freelancer, you got to work with what you're handed. In this particular case, since the penciler, Andre, is in Russia, the creator of the project, which is Alex, sends me the line work at 600 DPI, and we transfer the files digitally, and they send it to me, and then I can take them in Photoshop, and I print them out. You can see in non-photo blue. That's so that after I placed all my line work in black and white, I can then remove the I can remove the blue penciled work underneath in Photoshop. I can remove that, keeping my line art. So that since I am printing the page here in my studio, then I get to choose the type of Bristol board that I'm most comfortable with. Um, and I'm actually comfortable with, I really enjoy the 400 series, so I will ink over vellum, but I also have inked over smooth. And the 500 series costs a little more, and plate is it's a good surface, it's really smooth. It just depends on uh, what you prefer as you're working, and if you want to spend a little bit of extra, then that might be the type of surface that you want to buy. And it's also great too if you're starting out, and you're going to be printing out your own pencil work anyway, because you won't be inking over um, original artwork when you're building a portfolio. In this case, you can go out online, and there's tons of pencilers have high res pencil work on their portfolios. A lot of times I go to DeviantArt and I find their line work there. And if they don't have a high res, I message them, and knowing that most of them are pretty busy, but they generally will get back to me. I send them a link and says, hey, this is my portfolio. This is what my inks look like. I really would like to add, I'd like to ink a page of your pencils, and I'd like to add it to my portfolio. Would you mind if I had a high res? And a lot of the guys have been very nice and very kind, and they've sent me high res pencils, and so I've got a handful of pages that I'm going to be inking specifically for my portfolio. A lot of these pages here, you do get to see partial pieces of the pages, and you get to see a few pages from this particular project. I've been given permission by the creator of this project, and so that we can show them and use them in the video. He's been nice enough to allow us to allow me to use the pages within the video. And if you're interested in the project, there's a link in my Facebook for their Facebook. I'm sorry. Link will be down in the description, and a link to my DeviantArt page if you're interested in taking a look at my portfolio. I've had a few different guys from DC Comics and different guys been nice enough to send me their work, and I'm going to be inking that, updating my portfolio as I get caught up on the pages here with this project. So spotting black on a page, it's fairly simple. It's basically just filling in all the black area on your page, and I shouldn't say just, because I mean there is a technique behind it. Now it's up to you on when you want to spot your black. I save it to the very end. As you can see here, all my line work was done, and I did some reverse inking and leaving the white space in between so that the page underneath shows through, and it'll show up as white, and save the spotting the black or filling in the black area for the very end. The reason I do that is because when you apply ink, and I use the Koh-i-Noor universal ink, and as I place, the more ink I place on the Bristol board, the Bristol board will then begin to warp, and it will begin to kind of bevel. It'll kind of you can kind of see when I place my hand down on the page, it kind of bends and it flexes because it's now has much more fluid in the fiber when the ink is wet, and then it dries and it kind of expands the page, and so I don't get this really flat page where if I were to spot my blacks and then try to do my line work, my lines would come out wavy. So I save it for the end. So at the end, the line work's already done. All the nice fancy little lines are already placed on the page, and they're the best that I can get them at that point. So then I can go in and spot my black and not have to worry about the page warping on me. Because it does. It will start to kind of bend and kind of warp, and especially right now for us where I'm at, it's winter time, and the outside is extremely cold, and so we've got heaters on and indoors, and so the pages start to warp on my drafting table, and we don't really get a lot of rain here in Texas. So if you're in an area where there's a lot of rain and humidity, your pages probably do the same thing and warp. And if you look down at the bottom right of the page of your screen, you could see where the page was kind of lifting up off the table. because it's starting to bend with all the ink that's absorbing into the fibers on the page. And this Bristol board, I believe, is a 2-ply Bristol board from the 400 series of Strathmore. What I do is I buy the 14 by 17 pad. I take it down to my local copy center. In my area, it's Kinko's, and they use a laser and they just chop it down to 11 by 17, and then I feed that through my Workforce printer from Epson, and then I can print out directly on the 11 by 17, and this way I'm able to choose the type of paper that that I like, and that's the process. There's a few steps in it, but it works for me, and I prefer doing that because the 400 series, unfortunately, they don't sell it in 11 by 17 that I haven't been able to find. If you know of a Strathmore 11 by 17, please do let me know. Post it in the comments or something. I'd love to be able to cut out a process and speed it up when I'm inking. All right, throat's getting a little dry. Sorry about that. Don't mean to cough into the microphone here. But as I mentioned, it's flu season. Allergies are really bad right now. So, but I wanted to go ahead and make this video. I apologize I didn't have a video for last week. Last week, we also had holidays in there, and so wasn't able to get any of the extra work done for the videos. But back on regular schedule now, so you will see videos up there. And this one, coming out on Wednesday rather than Tuesday. So I'm actually thinking about making the videos every Wednesday. So I'm not exactly sure. So far I'm sticking with Tuesdays, but I'm kind of toying with the idea of presenting video on new videos every Wednesday. If there's a particular video that you would like to see, if you have questions about, if you'd like to know how to use a crow quill 102, because there are two different type of crow quills. There's a 108 and there's a 102. The 102 is the standard. It's widely used by a lot of inkers, and looking back, and I remember when I first started using the crow quill, there were a lot of obstacles to overcome. So if there's things in the video that videos you would like to see, such as I mentioned the crow quill and wanting to learn how to use it, please post that in the comments. And if you guys like to see that, I'll make the video on how I use the crow quill and different techniques, and the type of ink I use, and how much ink I place on the crow quill, how I get the ink to flow, how I throw my lines. There's I'm sure there's a lot of different questions that you have, and there's different styles and different way of using the crow quill. Everyone throws their line differently, but I can present and show the way that I do it. Or if there's a particular video, if you'd like to see on using a brush, inking hair, anything like that, post it in the comments. This one here is spotting black, because I feel it sounds very simple when you look at it on a page and you think, oh, it's just filling in all the black, but there's a little more thought that goes into it. There are little techniques that go into that. As I mentioned, I save spotting the black for the very end for a reason, so that the page doesn't warp on me as I'm doing the fine line work. And the other part of it is that at the end, spotting the black is pretty quick, it's pretty fast process, because there isn't a lot of fancy line work going into it. And as you see the black fill in that page, the page then starts to feel complete, and you can sit back and you can just let out a sigh and a breath of air and go, oh, it's almost there, it's almost done. It does. I almost want to say it tricks the eye and makes you feel that the page is completed. Sometimes even after you've got to do reverse inking, you've got some touch-ups and things you've got to do afterwards. Even after, if you're inking over original pencils, then you've got to go over and erase erase the pencils that are underneath, that are showing. So sometimes you got to go back and touch up your ink, depending on how much ink you've laid down. Some of the area where there's less ink, it erases away. But you know, I wanted to go ahead and take the time and talk about, you know, spotting your black. If you have questions or you have suggestions or you want to mention how you spot your black, feel free to post it down there in the comments. Again, thank you for taking the time, sitting here with me, and viewing the videos. If you like all the updates with the videos and like to know when the new ones are out, be sure to subscribe. And don't forget to rate. Please rate the videos. And thank you so much. I appreciate you hanging out with me.